I think it's just amazing that technology has gotten to this, like to the point where Anna and I can actually sit here at our houses respectively, like clear across the world.
Days apart. It's Monday here and you're on
Yeah.
Sunday.
You're in the future. How is the future bright over there? How are we looking? Are we looking good?
Future, yep. Today is looking pretty good. It's sunny outlook here.
Sunny outlet, fantastic. That's what I like to hear. You know, like nothing's been destroyed. You know, the world is still like spinning forward.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. So far, so good.
So today we get to talk about some really important issues. We get to talk about some fun issues and just deep dive into your world of horses. I love that you've combined dressage and yoga, like this mindfulness aspect. You talk about mindfulness, you talk about Reiki, you got yoga. It's just like really looking at a person and holistically in the partnership with the horse.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a bit of a journey to get there, but yeah, it's a pretty good place to be.
Nice. And like, speaking of getting there, tell me how you did get there. Like, what was your journey? When did you first start with horses?
I come from a non-horsey family, growing up in probably one of the famous horse countries in Germany, but absolutely non-horsey family. My dad actually had allergy against horses with asthma, so I wasn't very popular when I decided that's what I wanted to do. And I started riding when I was 10, and in Germany, at least at that time, they were really strict that you had to do heaps of lunge lessons before you were allowed to actually go out and ride the horse. So I think I did at least 20, 30 lunge lessons. And I mean, looking back on it now, I found it really valuable because it just sets you up so well in your riding seat. And I think that's what, like today, I highly recommend to all of my clients to once in a while do a lunge lesson just to like work on their position and really connect with the horse. So yeah, I started riding at about 10, and in Germany you don't decide on a discipline, you just kind of do everything, and you need to do these exams to be able to compete, where you do dressage, jumping, and a theory aspect.
Interesting.
And went to start competing mainly in dressage because I got afraid of the height of jumping, and I was like, if I want to be really good at this, then I have to not be afraid. So relatively early on, I decided to like mainly compete in dressage. I still jump my horse for like gymnasticizing, but basically never stopped since then.
So here, hold on just a second. For people out there who don't know what gymnasticizing is, for one, and what dressage is, you know, for more Westerners, like they hear the term thrown around, but they're just like, but what is it really? Like, they have saddles without horns, and they're usually black, and their horses are big and fancy.
Yeah, and I mean, dressage, if you translate it from French, it actually just means training. So, and the dressage movements are normally ridden within an arena, a rectangle shaped arena, and you get the horse to, the more advanced you get, the more sophisticated and light the aids become. Aids being your legs, your seat, and your reins, and the weight that you distributed in the saddle to change the way the horse moves. So moving forward and back, so you really compress the horse. Some people may know the image of the horse doing piaffe, where it's like almost like trotting on the spot. Half passes where horses move forward and sideways, like crossing their legs. And it's really about getting the horse to become super sensitive to the rider's aids, that it looks, people often say, oh, well, riding, that's not that's not hard at all. You basically just sit there. And I mean, that's what it's supposed to look like. But to get to that point, there's a lot of work that has to go in.
They're not just like reading your mind in that moment?
Well, sometimes it does feel like that when you have a horse for a while and you've ridden them for a long time. Yes, it does sometimes feel like that, but it takes a while to get there, let's put it that way. So that you're on the same wavelength and the thoughts can be transmitted well.
I can definitely relate to that. You know, you and I had spoken before about how the energy affects the
Yeah.
horse, the energy that we have inside of ourselves. And then, you know, like biomechanically, tell me a little bit more about how you've integrated yoga into your work with horses and doing dressage. Like, how do those two connect for you?
Yeah, I mean, I in my youth, I didn't do yoga because I thought it was a little bit boring. I preferred more energetic exercises or sports, and I completely missed like the mindfulness aspect of yoga. And then during a challenging period in my life, about nearly 10 years ago now, my sister-in-law was becoming a yoga teacher, and she used me as her guinea pig for teaching. And during that time, I was working in corporate and traveling a lot and coming out of a bad relationship. And I was nearly at the point of kind of breaking down. But everyone else can always tell you that. But you're like, no. Like, you just focus. I'm fine. I'm just like, running on adrenaline and no idea about it. And the yoga made me really connect with myself in a way that I could feel my body. And I mean, I was a high level dressage competing athlete next to my corporate job. So, I mean, I would have thought I would have a good sense of my body, but like really feeling my body, I got more connected with my feelings of emotions that were arising. And rather than being in the emotions, being able to almost like take that step back and notice when emotions are arising, and really becoming aware and more connected about my thoughts and like, oh my God, like what's going on, and how we live in our mind, jumping into future and jumping into past. And so initially, like I felt the benefits of yoga mainly immediately after the yoga practice, while I was like lying in shavasana in that like resting pose at the end. But I started to notice how I could bring that mindfulness and awareness and I guess like deeper connection with myself into my riding. And I mean, riding, no matter if you ride dressage or jumping or Western or pleasure, even if you just go hacking out with your horse, when you ride a horse, the main aim is to become a unit with your horse, like two beings connecting. And how am I supposed to connect with another being if I'm not connected within myself? And so that was kind of the more I had these realizations and awareness and mindfulness that I could kind of put the mirror up towards myself, the more I could bring that into my riding. And it also gave me a sense of compassion of like when my horse didn't want to do something that I felt like, okay, well, I can relate to that in the yoga pose. That's challenging. Like I want to draw back, or I'm like cursing towards the teacher, or like there's resistances coming up. And then I'm like, okay, well, if my horse in training does that, that could be the case. And also like having more compassion that everyone has like ebbs and days you're more happy, you're a bit more grumpy. Not and just bringing that compassion towards myself and then into my riding.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think having compassion for ourselves is incredibly important, like forgiveness and the whole expectation and ego part, right?
Yeah. And I mean, especially when you're competing, I found that quite challenging. I almost had like two personalities, or one when I was just like with my horse and riding and training and having this beautiful relationship, and then I get to the competition and like the ego would pop up, and it was just like only about the performance. And it's not to say that like I'm still competing today and loving it, but I'm able to bring to kind of keep that ego in check a little bit more and bring more of that compassion and like I guess my true self into the competition as well. And not just because I'm less tense, because I can work with like stress reduction techniques, but also because, as you say, that sense of forgiveness and compassion and love can stay present even in highly stressful situations.
No, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. And then you also do high performance coaching.
Yeah, so I studied psychology at uni and worked in my corporate career in learning and development and HR roles. So I was coaching leaders, I was designing trainings for high performing staff, and I also did a life coaching degree next to the working in corporate, and was on the side doing a little bit of high performance coaching for athletes. And but then once my corporate job got too busy, I kind of just let all of those things fall away, because I wanted to at least be able to focus on my riding at the same time.
Yeah.
And so now, since becoming a mum and life changing quite a bit, so now I professionally ride and coach dressage, and teach yoga and do the high performance coaching.
That's fantastic. And so in the different situations when people are going to shows and just like your clients in general with the horse work and coaching, what are some of the primary things that you see people struggling with, and how do you help them with it in partnership with the horse and yoga?
Yeah, it could be anything. I mean, some people struggle more with the physical aspect of riding. I mean, if you have injuries, or if you're generally in a more sedentary job and then you want to go, and more we have to become athletes with our horses. It's not just the horse that is the athlete. We have these big highly bred, very swinging, moving horses. So for us to be able to sit them properly, I mean, yes, you can buy all the gear and that helps. So I help them with the physical aspect of giving them yoga, asana, and a couple of like physical exercises to stabilize and strengthen, as well as supple and loosen the body. In yoga, we work with the concept of stira and sukha. So stira meaning stability, steady foundation, and sukha being lightness, ease, and flexibility. And you can imagine, like when you're riding a horse, you need both. You need to have the hips to be able to flexibly move with the horse, and at the same time you need to have like an upright position. You want to have the head, hands soft but like a steady connection. So combining those two concepts. But what I find most interesting, or where my passion really lies, is bringing more the philosophy of yoga and the mindfulness and awareness into people's riding. So when someone's, for example, struggling with competition anxiety, or has had a bad fall and is about like wants to refine their joy in riding again, or if someone is wanting to set goals for the year and just have a little bit more structure about how do I achieve them, rather than kind of just like going to ride whenever you can make it, and then like another year's passed and you feel you haven't really progressed at all. It really depends on the person, what's important to them.
I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like with the dressage, most of what I see is people just getting on and riding their horses and not doing quite as much groundwork. Do you see that?
Yes, I do. Personally, I only entered into the world of doing some groundwork with my last horse, or with my current horse, who was quite tricky when I first bought him, that he really disliked people getting on his back. So anything that was above and behind him, he got really nervous about. And I worked with a natural horsemanship guy quite a bit in like building the relationship, but also the disengaging, and doing a lot of him moving away from me and then standing still, and like noticing the response of him to the work that I was doing on the ground. Also a lot of desensitizing work. And probably for about the first almost year, I did that every time before I got on. Now, I don't do it as much. I mean, I kind of check in with him if it's necessary, if there's a super windy day, or I'm a little bit on edge, that I think, okay, well, maybe it's just good to go back to that. I do find, not sure if you would call that like groundwork, but that I try every time before I approach my horse to do a little bit of a check-in with myself. So
yeah, I think that's
checking my breathing, and almost like while I'm still sitting in the car before stepping out to the barn, letting go of the day that's been so far a little bit, that I can enter the barn and greet my horse with on a fresh slate.
And so for people who don't usually do that and struggle with that, why is that important to do for both you and your horse?
Yeah, I mean, the horse has no idea how my day's been so far. And I mean, if I've rushed out of the office after like my boss, having a challenging conversation with my boss or something, and then I bring this cloud of like negativity and stress into the barn, the horses are super sensitive animals and they pick up on those things. And then we're there riding in the arena, and we just carry all of that load on our shoulders into our riding, and we're like, why is my horse reacting this weird? Like, why is he so spooky today? And then like that, it kind of just like a snowball effect, how it then just gets worse and worse. And then we get more frustrated because our ride was shit as well. And then the horse was spooky, and then what's wrong today? And then we come to the end of the day, and I'm not sure. Some people may not even realize like what has actually happened. Some just say it was a completely shit day, and some may lie there in bed going like, oh my God, like what have I done today? Like my poor horse. It's not his fault that I had this shit conversation with my boss.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I find the energy, and I mean, I'm a Reiki practitioner as well. So I do find the energy is something, yes, it's non-tangible and it's not necessarily immediately visible, but it's absolutely an energy at force. And we all know when we are, as I said earlier, like on the same wavelength with our horse, like when things are in flow, and it just, everything kind of comes easy to one. And compared to those times where you're almost like two disunited units and like you just can't come together.
Yeah, like in relationships sometimes with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the tagline of my business is inviting yoga off the mat into the saddle and your life. And I mean, like the flow-on effect, if something, many people think your yoga practice is what happens on the mat, and then that's your yoga done for the day. But I really believe the yoga is kind of the flow-on effect, the practice, the formal yoga practice, may it be a meditation, may it be pranayama, breathing exercises, or a physical yoga practice on the mat. They are just to really embed us in that energy, but the yoga is something that we carry with us anywhere we go.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
I feel like we get to do mental yoga sometimes too.
Yeah. I really believe, I mean, personally, I see the most of the value actually in the mental side of it compared to just the physical. Yeah, it's nice to have a strong and supple body, but you can also do other exercises to create that. Whereas the combination of movement and breath really brings the mindfulness into it as well. And that's where the beauty lies, if you ask me.
Where do you feel like your most powerful aha moment has ever been with you and one of your horses?
I think I can't. It's okay. That's two. I think the first one I can't really pinpoint day or time.
Just the experience, though. Like
it was the experience of having a bad ride on my horse, and then for the first time noticing the thoughts going on in my mind, and how I was the one who was really, what's the word? Like disrupting myself. That I was the one that was looping myself into this negative loop of anger and resentment. And I was just like, the horse was the victim. And it wasn't his fault. And it was just what was going on up here rather than what the horse was doing. And the humbleness that created in myself, and I mean at that point also like guilt to a certain extent in that moment as well, that was a big switch kind of in how I approach my riding. And I mean, look, I still have shit rides and where things don't go, and like sometimes I'm still stuck in that negative loop, and then it's like, okay, well, if I can't change it right now, either I just continue riding and I'll just try and see if I can put that in the background and just focus on the job that's there, or I just go out for a hack, go for a walk around the bush instead, and yeah, and then not bring all of that energy into my horse. Yeah. The other moment would have been my current horse Ollie has a heart condition, and when I was able to, every competition I ride now, when riding down the center line, I kind of ground myself in a sense of gratitude. So rather than being focused on like the nervousness of the competition, it's just this like, oh wow, we get to do this together. And that's completely changed the way how I approach competitions. And
beautiful.
All these heart condition may make it more at front of mind and a little bit more dramatic, but I mean, really, we never know if we're going to be able to ride a horse again. Like anything can happen. Like nothing is certain. We could have an accident. The horse could, I mean, look, God forbid, but the horse could have an accident in the paddock. And so just this realization that really every day is a gift. So every day when I get off my horse or when I leave the stable, I literally every single day, I give him a great big hug and say, thank you and I love you. Just because I want that to be the last memory, if it is. Yeah, and it sounds maybe a bit cheesy, but it just makes me feel, yeah, I mean, I guess it comes down to me just feeling really good about myself and connected to him. And that if this is how far our journey has come, like the only thing that there is love and gratitude.
It's so incredibly beautiful. I really appreciate that, because I lost my heart horse when she was 5 because she died of a brain aneurysm.
Oh.
And so, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really hard, and you never know. Like you try your best, and sometimes there's situations, but you hadn't anticipated. Like for me, I spent years afterwards feeling guilty because I had led her down to where I thought there was water, and I thought the ground was more stable than it was. And so it could hold my weight, but then we got to a point and she sunk down to her hips. And I just didn't know, it's like, oh, I should have known better. Like horses instinctively, like, don't go to places that don't take faith. And then she trusted me, and I took her down to that place, and she sunk, and I had to like unhook her and give her space. And she thrashed so hard that she strained, and like, I think it was like 3 or 4 days later, she died from a brain aneurysm that was undoubtedly from that situation. And so
oh God, I'm sorry.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's so hard. And as equestrians, like this, I feel like this is part of the reason why in our culture, in the equestrian culture, why it can be so difficult to sometimes hear perspectives that don't already align with our own. Because none of us know everything in the industry. You could be alive 100 years and spend your whole lifetime with horses and still not know it all. But how do you let go of the shame and the guilt when you learn something new that is totally counter to everything that you've been doing, and you wanted the best for your horse, and then like it turns out you've been doing a shit job of it, and you've been actually making things bad for your horse, like physically, psychologically, like whatever, how do we support each other? How do we forgive ourselves for not knowing, and just how do we?
And everyone and anyone can tell you, look, it's not your fault, and there's nothing for you to be guilty for. But until you reach that point yourself, where you are like, at that time, I just did not know better, and almost like looking back at the person that you were back at the time, and and
it's been like 15 years for me. I still think about it like on the regular.
Yeah. It's, yeah. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. And then it's just so important, I think, with so many things going on right now, and especially like, how do we forgive ourselves? How do you forgive others? How do we come to a space with our horses? When I have this young girl, she was 13, talked to me just yesterday, and she's just like, how do I get my horse to listen to me? Like, when I'm like, how do I calm myself when I'm feeling frustrated with him? Which I thought was so great, because I was talking to her about emotional regulation, and as a 13-year-old, I was like, great job, kiddo, for like wanting to ask that question.
Yeah. And having the awareness, I mean, that's the first step.
Yeah, the first step of like, oh, my emotions are affecting my horse.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was just like, start with breath. Right?
Yeah.
Because it's really hard for any of us to learn, like child, adult, animal, if we can't, if we're not like in a calm state.
Yeah.
We're worried, frantic, we're frustrated ourselves. Because I feel like horses typically want to do the right thing, but as humans, we give them the wrong cues because we're not good at being clear, because oftentimes we have too many things on our head, or like we haven't trained enough in a particular skill to do it like with finesse and clarity.
Yeah. And that's often also what I see when it's the fine line between having horses as like your recreational activity, and then also realizing that they're not just a pet that you can kind of have as a cat, just do whatever they want, but there has to be, based on the evolution of the horse, there has to be certain behaviors trained and boundaries set for the safety of everyone, because they are a 700 kilo sometimes plus animal that has strong instincts and is very sensitive, and for everyone's safety, I mean, as the baseline, and then you can build on top of that everything and anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where being balanced is also really important, because as riders, if we're not balanced on top of the horse, then the horse, of course, has to compensate for us to stay in balance. And then they get more tightness and dysfunction in their body.
Yeah.
And understanding that mind-body connection and the effects that our energy and our weaknesses, as well as our strengths,
And physical imbalances create mental imbalances, because if you're sitting on the horse and you're feeling insecure because you're all wobbly and you feel you have to latch on, like that will affect your nervous system, because you'll move more into adrenaline and fear. That will start the thoughts kicking off in your mind as well. So there is definitely importance in, and that's where, again, coming back to the lunging, I think there's not enough really lunging where you are in the situation as a rider without having to think about navigation and steering and stopping and getting horses to move off the leg, like really just focusing on, am I balanced? Because that's the main thing. Like if you look at the three things our seat should do on the horse, is first of all, it's not to interrupt the horse. Second of all, it's being able to give aids that the horse can understand. And third of all is through our body and through our seat, feeling the response of the horse to the aids, that we can then adjust our aids accordingly, or just stay quiet if the horse is doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But the first thing is not to disrupt the balance of the horse. I mean, imagine you having someone on your back and they're like wiggling around, like that will absolutely affect you and your posture.
Yeah.
And then happening over days and weeks and months and years. And then we send the horse to the osteopath and wonder why it's not getting better. Whereas really, like, maybe it's us that needs to, first of all, go to the osteopath to get aligned, and then make sure that we like create a stable and supple body to ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was laughing with one of my friends recently, because I see this with equestrians on the regular, that they give all of their time and all their money to their horses, and then they do a terrible job taking care of themselves. It's like, no, they need chiropractic, they need massage, they need all the right gear, they need these liniments, they need like X, Y, and Z. I need to stretch my horse every time before I get on it. But they don't stretch themselves. They don't get massage. They're like, I can't afford a chiropractor. I can't afford X and Y and Z. I can't afford to like eat healthy food. I have to buy my horse the best supplements ever. And I think it's beautiful that they have such high regard for their horses. They want what's best for their horses, but there's like a total disconnect between their physiological being and mental being and their horse's experience. And so I'm so grateful people like you are out there and the stuff that I'm doing to help people as well to bring that back together, the connection between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recently heard the term of the six-legged athlete. It's not only the four-legged athlete, it's not only the two-legged athlete. As equestrians, it's a six-legged athlete. And
I love that.
if you think about like how you feed your horse, and as you say, only the best supplements, only the best feed, and then the stuff that we sometimes put down on our face. Like I wouldn't be feeding my horse that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're like, no, our horses can't have too much sugar as we eat like ice cream. I love ice cream. I talk about ice cream on my podcast. That's like all the time because I love it and I love it. And so I can call myself out on that like 100%. But
absolutely. For me, it's chocolate. So yes, absolutely.
What kind of chocolate? Serious question. What are we talking like dark chocolate? Milk chocolate?
I've kind of like made myself really like dark chocolate, and now like I think my palate is kind of like tuned into that. So for me it's dark chocolate.
See, I love white chocolate and milk chocolate. Like dark chocolate's too much for me. But I love that other people can appreciate dark chocolate. But I feel like those people are also the kind of people that usually like beer and wine. Which, like, do you like beer and wine?
Wine, not beer.
Wine, not beer. See, but you can.
Not very German of me, I know.
I know. What the heck? I'm just.
I've never been to Oktoberfest either. No.
What?
Yeah.
How is this possible?
Yeah, exactly.
I've even been to a baby Oktoberfest in Stuttgart.
Oh my god.
And you're like, and were you like born there or something?
No,
I forget where you were.
Germans, you just don't go. I mean, yeah, I know.
You're like, I haven't been back in forever. That's hilarious. Well, speaking of confidence, you had talked to me previously about an injury that you had with your horses and then the repercussions from that injury. So can you tell us a little bit about the struggles that you had to overcome to continue on with your dreams?
Yeah, I had two injuries. Well, one was not really an injury. The first one was an actual injury where I broke my acetabulum, and that is the bone in which the femur sits. So like you could probably call it the hip bone. And no, it wasn't falling off a horse. It was running across the road, stumbling. And then with my stretched out leg, I kind of like, concussed it into my hip, and it split into 3 pieces.
Ouch.
And thank God it was like they were all in the right place, so I didn't have to have any surgery and screws put in. But I had to lie on my back in hospital for 3 weeks without moving. So no shower, no toilet, like literally lying flat on my back. And I had to have, sounds gross, but like pans put under for my business to be done and other people helping me clean myself up. So it was a super humbling experience.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And after that, I mean, it took me about 3 months to be able to like learn to walk again, and then getting back onto the horse. And I mean, the hip is like exactly where there's a lot of movement when you're on the horse. And for someone who had ridden all her life and riding was just second nature to me. Like my body muscle memory, it was all there. Like the longest I'd maybe not ridden was for, a couple of weeks when I was on a long holiday or something. Otherwise, I was just always riding. So it gave me a real insight into adult riders having to relearn to ride, and all the nervousness and like physical challenges that come with that, learning to rebuild the core, especially with my injury, being able to just relax and allow my hips to move freely with the horse, like in any gait, without the fear of pain or like injury. I was super lucky at the time. I had my previous horse, who's unfortunately has passed away since then, but he and I had been together for 6 years or so, and he was just so tuned in that when I got on, like, it almost felt like he was walking as if on clouds, like super careful, just really making sure that I was like safe, and he completely knew that something was up. So
what a good boy.
yeah, that was the first one. And again, at that time, I went back to my instructor lunging me for me to rebuild my seat. And then the second one was after childbirth. And I mean, this is not spoken about very often, so I hope you don't mind my bluntness and speaking about a very kind of hush-hush topic. But I gave birth naturally to my daughter, and had massive pelvic floor issues that basically every time I would do rising trot, I would be leaking, like peeing my pants while on the horse. So I was riding in pads for a long time, and I was just completely, I mean, initially I thought, oh my God, is this just me? Like, because no one speaks about it. And I felt so embarrassed. And I mean, it's a very personal thing. And like, even like leaking through pads, and then you see that spot, like we have a mirror in our arena, and you see that spot appearing on your jodhpurs, and it was just like, oh my God, what if someone else notices this?
Yeah.
And since then, I mean, I've had quite a few conversations, because I've tried to encourage especially women who have had children. And I mean, we all know the pelvic floor is a muscle, and so after we age as well, like muscles fade. So older riding women also would have that challenge, that especially now, again, coming back to these big swinging horses, like you're working against nature with the rising trot, and physiologically what's going on. So what really helped me there is I know you posted something on the page just recently about that as well, which I haven't personally done, but like
the pelvic for physical therapy.
That would be something I would definitely look into. So for me, it was more working with yoga and with breath work to strengthen the pelvic floor. And like I've now, like 3 years later, reached a point where most days I'm fine, but there's still the on and off days where, yeah, I can't completely control myself.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate your courage and vulnerability in bringing that topic forward, because there are a lot more women that are struggling with that than people realize. And not just older women, but, you know, younger women too, and women that have experienced birth, bless you, women who have experienced childbirth, or women who have experienced sexual trauma have those issues. And people don't necessarily think about just like the fascia around the nerves and the arteries and like the muscles, everything that's down there, like the tightness in the muscle. Just like anytime you have a tight muscle in your body, like it can hurt. And people don't think about like just pain with sex in general, you know, and how oftentimes like when we're stressed out, like we hold stress in different parts of our body just naturally, right? And men can have pelvic floor issues as well. And then like performance issues can come into play into the bedroom, and like pain with ejaculation, and these are all just really like sensitive subjects for people, but it's just life, you know. And if we can just open up that conversation in a safe container, so that people can start getting referrals, just like you and I talked about it before. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I had this amazing physical therapist for my pelvic floor. Because when I had my back surgeries, like I dealt with like the incontinence issue because of the damage of the nerve from my low back, because I had waited so long to have surgery. And the disc was so like hugely protruding and pushing on the nerve root in my spine, like when I couldn't walk more than 10 feet at a time. And there was just so much going on. And and the tightness in my pelvic floor. And I had had lots of physical therapy for my low back and everything else. And it was crazy when they did the internal work and I could actually feel the nerve in my big toe.
Wow.
While they were working internally on the fascia around the nerve that goes down your leg. Like, that's insane to me. I'm just like, what?
And I think that's where, again, like, we are holistic beings. Like, we think we have a problem in this part of our body and that's the only place that's affected by it. No, like, we have the fascia traveling in Chinese medicine. Like, we talk about the meridians moving through the body as well. So it's all interconnected. And and again, like, then we bring that into our riding and we hold ourselves differently. We may like slump over a bit, or we may not like lift our chest and open our rib cage because I'm not able to contain myself down there. So we really like taking that step back and looking at the whole picture rather than just like, I mean, absolutely. Sometimes it's about diving in and getting to the root of it and looking what exactly is going on, but then taking that step back and looking, okay, well, what is the environment in which this is happening, and what are all the other areas that may be affected?
Yeah, which reminds me about, I love my mom so much. She cracks me up. She got this book on yoga for your face to help with aging. And
wow.
And so they'd have you do different exercises of how you engage your tongue and like the top and like putting it on the top of your mouth or whatever. And then so you have this long muscle that comes along and inserts along your jawline, right? And it's really thin. It's called your platysma. And you can actually hold like right by your sternum and lift up and like jet your chin out.
Yeah.
You can feel it, right? And why I bring that up is because until I did that with her one day randomly while I was driving, I was like, oh my gosh, you really can feel that in your neck. And just by moving your tongue and placing it in a different part of your mouth.
Yeah.
And holding it and trying to activate different muscles in your face.
Yeah.
And that thing makes me think about horses and the importance of having really light hands, because when you're restricting the horse's tongue, right? And that's a really long muscle, and it fascially engages with other parts of the body and with like all that different stuff. How that impacts like a chain reaction through the whole body. And that's why I love having conversations about looking at the horse holistically as well, and how we engage with them. You know, and you think it's like, oh, it's just their tongue. Like, it doesn't do that much. It's just like this little thing. The bit's here and the tongue's here, and that's like where the conversation ends, because you're controlling their face. And I'm like, oh, no. That's not where it ends. And there's not like contact, I feel like, with the tongue is okay, but having the lightest, connection possible.
Yeah. In my dressage lessons as well, I try, because we're such visual beings and we do everything with our hands, like, it's so easy for us when we're riding to look what's in front of us and then try and fix that with our hands. So my horse's head is too high, my horse's head is too low, whatever, I want the horse to bend more. We see it and we want to fix it. And what I've been trying to work with a little bit more is, an instructor of mine recently said that, is to work with, in yoga we say that our third eye is like the point in between our eyebrows that kind of makes us see more intuitively. Don't know where he got it from, but he imagines the third eye to be at the back of his head. And so he says, well, when you think about your third eye, you go more into the feeling and what's happening behind you. So what's happening with the horse's hindquarters, and rather than seeing, you go into like the feeling of what's happening there, the hindquarters and the back. And at least in dressage, I'm not sure about in other disciplines, we try and engage the horse's hindquarters and then have that energy travel over the spine, through the neck, into the forehand and into a light hand. So rather than trying to fix any contact issues with the hand, thinking about the third eye, what's happening behind me, and through the engagement of the hindquarters, kind of get into the...
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. And what's the name of that trainer as well, in case anybody wanted to look him up and ask?
That is Brett Parbury. He has got a really cool dressage breakthrough program available as well that I sometimes like co-contribute to. So yeah, he's a Australian dressage rider that's been to World Equestrian Games, and yeah, he's got a couple of, I think many Americans would probably know him. If they are into dressage, they would probably know his name.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Do you have any other science that you would like to bring forward for people, like little things people might not necessarily know and connection points with what you do? We've already covered a lot, I feel like, just recently.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned as well is one way how we can really check in with our energy and what's going on is taking a moment to pause and notice our breath, and checking in with the quality of our breath. So is our breath like fast and shallow, or is it like long and deep breaths? And of course, when we are riding and there's a bit of like athleticism happening, like our breath kind of speeds up a little bit, but can we still have a nice and steady breath? And it's same, like we will notice when we're riding our horses, and when they are in a really good mental mindset and working, engaging the whole body, they've got a really steady, beautiful breath, and you can really hear that breath. And it's not that we have the same breath lengths of them, because I mean, like our lung capacity is completely different, but you may find some kind of unison of even the breath when there's a nice working union happening there with the horse.
Oh, that's beautiful. And where can people find you?
I've got a Facebook page because I live on the coast and I have the horses more on the countryside. So my page is called Coast to Country Yoga and Dressage. And otherwise you can just find me by Anna Preuss, and there's a link to my page. And I've also got a website, coasttocountryyogandressage.com.au.
Fantastic. And how long have you been on this journey for?
I've been riding since I was a little girl, and I started having my daughter. I did my yoga teacher training, and I just was not very keen to go back into that corporate life because I wasn't sure how I would be able to combine family, riding, and that. And so now, yeah, my riding and yoga has become my work, and that's it's beautiful because I can flexibly arrange it with family, and especially while they're so small, it's really nice to be able to. Yeah, it's a really important role for me in my life, and to honor that and not try and suppress any of those areas.
I love it so much that you've gone through all the things that you have, and you didn't give up on your dream, and you still get to just live your dream and work with horses and hang out with your family and help people and horses and like the whole thing. It's just fantastic. I'm so
very grateful.
So appreciate your time here. And I have one last question for you, which is, who inspires you in the world today?
Oh, I love that question. Can I have two?
You can have 10. Whoever, people, animals, alive or dead, who inspires you?
One would be, I have this quote and I love it, by Mahatma Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world. And especially, I mean, at the moment with lots going on and like politically, like things are looking a bit different in your country now, but I mean, there's always big crazy things happening in this beautiful crazy world, that it's easy to get overwhelmed. But if I can be the change that I would like to see in the world, and just look at my own behavior, and that's how I treat myself, how I treat my family, how I treat my horses and the people I know, how I live in this world in terms of the waste that I create, and how I shop consciously and treat people consciously. So that's a big one that I try and keep front of mind to bring into my life. And the second one is my coach in Germany with whom I do online lessons. His name is Christoph Hess. He is quite well known. He's also an international judge and trainer. And he is very experienced when it comes to the training of the horse, but he's also a very good teacher, that's like in terms of how he teaches things and without overwhelming, and very sensitive to checking in with what does that student and that horse need at exactly that time, and always bringing up the mirror for the rider to look at themselves first before pointing the finger at the horse. Yeah. So what am I doing that may be creating what my horse is currently showing me? And I think having that as the baseline for not only my riding, but any interaction with the horse is a great place to start.
No, I really appreciate that accountability to be able to know, like, I'm the one that could be starting something. And thank you so much for sharing all of that. And we'll make sure links up so other people can research them as well.
Thank you. Lovely to chat with you, Elysia.
Thank you. It was fun as always, and I look forward to getting to talk more in the future.
Sounds good. You have a nice evening. Take care.
Bye, everybody.